Hey there everybody, nice to see you again. Thanks for coming out today. I'm out here at my favorite testing grounds. I'm really blessed and lucky to live so close to someplace so beautiful. And so the thought for the day is, the higher you go up the mountain, the fewer, the narrower, and the steeper the paths become. Keep that in mind, all right? So if you said to me, I want to get a very, very sharp, high resolution camera to do landscape photography, and my choices are the Nikon Z7 II 45 megapixel camera with the 24-70 f4 kit lens, or Fuji X-T5 or X-H2 with the 40 megapixel Fuji APS-C lens with, let's say, the 16-50 528, or, you know, one of their sharper lenses. Which would be sharper? And up until I started using DxO Labs Pure Raw 3 or DxO Photo Lab 6, when I was only using Capture 1, I would have said, well, at 100% viewing, the Nikon full frame is demonstrably sharper. And I can show you that, okay? The problem is that last night I went back to some images I took in February, okay? And I'll show them to you, and I'll show you what the problem is. All right, so back in February, I was testing the 40 megapixel Fuji APS-C sensor versus the 45 megapixel Nikon Z7 II. The Nikon had the 24-70 f4 kit lens, and I was using my 35mm f2 Fuji lens, which I found from these images that it had a problem. But here's two sample images, and this is interesting. So if we bring up these images, now I'm already zoomed into 200% here, because let's show you the whole image first. Okay, so there's the whole image on the Nikon. It's been cropped 4x5. It doesn't matter. We're going to be cropping it a lot more because I want to show you some specific areas. All right, so the area in question is over here. And so if we come up to 100%, let's go there. You can see that the Nikon in Capture 1 is pretty dang sharp. It's pretty impressive. Okay, and particularly if we compare and contrast that to the Fuji file, which is over here on the left, the Fuji file is not bad. Okay, but if we go to 200%, okay, the Fuji file kind of, I don't know, it's all right. It's okay. But if we go to 200% on the Nikon, again, it's not too bad, okay? Actually, I think it's better. I think the Nikon's better than the Fuji at 200%. This is extreme pixel peeping, all right? So, okay. That's Capture 1, all right? And if we get out of Capture 1 and we go to DxO Labs, DxO Photo Lab, now this is the Nikon file at 200%. Now, what I've got turned on here is I've got Deep Prime, which you're not going to see over here. You'll see it over here, and I don't find that particularly useful. We really don't even need that, so let's just turn back to high quality. Lens sharpness makes a big difference, chromatic aberration, and unsharp mask. And these are all the DxO Photo Lab 6 defaults. Just turned them on. So that's what it did for the Nikon image. And that's not bad. I mean, that's pretty good. This is 200%, mind you. Okay, let's go to 100%. So there it is at 100%. That's plenty sharp, all right? So, okay, we're good, right? So let's come over here to the Fuji file. And here, let's make it even. Let's go to high quality. We don't really need a noise reduction. These were both shot at base ISOs. So we've got lens sharpness on, chromatic aberration, and unsharp mask. That's all I did to these raw files, okay? And this is the Fuji file. And if we come into the Fuji file, this is a Fuji file 100%, right? But herein lies the rub. If we go into the Fuji file at 200%, and we come over here to this area here, and we look at that, and then we come over here to the Nikon file at 200%, okay, and we look at that, let's go back there and look again. I mean, this is 200%. Let me say that again. This is 200%. Okay. Yeah. You see what I'm on about? Now, I know the exposure is a little different and whatever, but there is, like right in here in this moss, right? I mean, look at that. And look at the grain, and I mean, look at the rock. So the thing is, using the, you know, if a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, well, a chain can be as strong as its strongest link if all the other links were as strong. So that's just your basic logic. So, you know, I'm not sure what to make of all this, in the sense that, like, if the Fuji, so now the Fuji, if we go back to 100%, I'll show you what the Fuji problem was. So the Nikon lens over here is much better. Look at this edge of this rock here. That's great. That's the Nikon at 100%. On the Fuji, it's terrible. Okay, the Fuji has this band on my 35 f2 lens where I think one of the aspherical elements was out of alignment. I actually got that lens swapped out with a new one. It's much better. So this lens had an issue, but the point being is, in the center over here, particularly over here, the lens was absolutely cracker sharp. And the sensor and the whole system in this area right here was better than the Nikon. Okay, I mean, at 100%, it's kind of a wash. Like, I mean, the exposure is different, but we're not looking at exposure. We're looking at, I mean, let's bump the exposure up on the Nikon. It's easy enough to do. Sure it is. Let's say about there, okay? And go back to here. All right. So let's go to 200%. Let's see if the exposure made that big of a difference. I think the Fuji's still nailing it right in through here. This whole rock. And up in here. This is 200%. The Nikon's falling apart a little bit. The Fuji's like hanging in there. Interesting. And what did, I think, make the difference was that DxO has the demosaicing of the X-Trans sensor is even superior to Capture One. So I brought both images, and I've been seeing that. I've been seeing, like, all my Fuji files have improved dramatically. All my Fuji RAW files have improved dramatically to the point where the RAWs are sharper than the JPEGs. DxO Pure RAW or Photolab 6 actually can process the Fuji JPEGs better than Fuji can. Is it possible that, or it should be possible, in my head, it should be possible that with the right lens and the right technique and the right processing, that I could get the 40 megapixel APS-C sensor to perform that way across the whole frame. Now that particular lens, the 35 f2, like I've mentioned, has had some issues, and the new one's better. But I'm not seeing that level of performance from all my lenses, or from really any of my lenses. But I haven't really known that that was possible, okay? So that's why I'm out here today. I want to get some shots. I've got all my primes with me. I've got the 16 to 55, you know, I've got the 16 millimeter f2.8 WR, the 23 millimeter f2, the 35 millimeter f2, the 50 f2, 16 to 50. Now my 75 to 300 is a good lens. I've got some shots from that I've been really happy with. And I've seen some stuff from that I ran through DxO that I was happy with in Capture One that I've run through DxO that just got better. Is it at the same level of, I don't know. I mean, I only saw this last night at about 10 o'clock last night, and it's about 11 o'clock the next morning. The prize in all this, if it pans out, is I would be able to get consistently better than Nikon Z7 II resolution out of ergonomically better and user interface better Fuji camera that's half the weight, size, cost, etc., that I prefer to shoot with. So really what it comes down to is pushing the APS-C 40 megapixel sensor to its absolute limits, and the whole system, the lenses, the processing, and DxO Photo Lab 6 and Pure Raw 3 are finally at the point where, like, yeah, I got that part of it. That's been the limiting factor up till now. Now that I've been using that program, I think it's 4 days, the Pure Raw 3 and the Photo Lab 6, I'm seeing a dramatic increase in my Fuji files, but tantalizingly, excruciatingly tantalizingly, I've seen some stuff that's absolutely blowing me away. And my question is can I get those results on a consistent basis? What is this system capable of now that I have a raw converter that's capable of extracting what I think is the most out of the system? That's what this is all about. So that it's worth it to take the time if this pans out. And if it doesn't, well, I need to know. Because I need to know if I can consistently rely on this when I'm out photographing. And by the way, Saturday, I'm hoping to take a trip to the John Day Sheeprock Unit fossil beds, the Blue Basin here in the middle of Oregon, which should be hopefully somewhat interesting. Very interesting, I hope. So I am going to go do some photography, and I'm going to concentrate on seeing what I get, and let's see, on maximizing my resolution, and let's see what happens. All right. So here we are back in DxO Photo Lab 6, and I'll start with this guy here. So on the ride home, he was sitting in a field, so I pulled over, slapped the 70 to 300 on, and got that shot. And there he is. He's having some lunch. So, yeah, there's a reason why they call it the Eagle Cap Wilderness. All right, that's not part of what this is all about. So I've got a couple of takeaways here. Let's look at this image here. This is shot at 25.7 focal length on the 16 to 55. And if we come in here, I've been through these already. Again, standard high quality noise processing, not D prime XD, so no AI involved, although you would only see it over here. These are shot at base ISO 125, so you don't need it. Got the basic lens sharpness, just the default DxO lens sharpness, chromatic aberration, unsharp mask. If it's too much, you can turn it down. This is at 100%, and it's right in the middle of the image right there. So I'm kind of grooving on that. That's as sharp as I need it to be at 100%. And at 200%, that's phenomenal. So, yeah, if we check the extreme corners, we lose it a little bit. Although that may not be losing it. That just may be depth of field. So let's go back to 100%, which is more reasonable. And I think that's more of a depth of field thing, but it could be the lens loses it a little bit in the corners. It looks pretty consistent across, so I don't know. Anyway, all I can tell you is I'm okay with that corner performance if that's as good as it gets, because this center performance is perfect. Look at that. So this is better than what I've seen out of the full frame cameras that I've used. Maybe a couple of images with the Sony 60 megapixel was at this level. But considering that this is an APS-C camera, that's just phenomenal. I mean, look, this is I'm blown away. This is phenomenal. So the 16 to 55 f2.8 zoom is a complete winner. It's easier to navigate over here. Let's check the corner over here. And what we're dealing with this is depth of field fall off. So I don't know if it's sharp in the corners back there or not. This is not the image for that. But I will tell you right now, it's sharp in the center. All right, so back to photo library. There's this image, which was shot at 50 millimeter f8. And if we come in here, and there it is. I couldn't ask for more than that at 1:1. That's the, I mean, look at the pine needles. And that's something that I've had a problem with, is any green foliage far away. Let's show you the full image. There it is. So yeah, I'm very happy with this level of performance. And it's a combination of the lens, the sensor, it's the whole system, but I've never seen this out of any other processor. DxO Photolab 6 is what's doing this. So it's definitely optimized for Fuji, and it just does a beautiful job. If we go 200%, which is ridiculous, I'm happy at 100%. If I can get it sharp at 100%, I'm happy. And this is sharp at 200%. So that's just incredible. Yeah. If you're shooting Fuji and you're not using a DxO product, you're missing out. You're leaving a lot on the table. I'll put it to you that way. Okay, so then I did some testing here, and this was at 48. Well, we've kind of seen that. Here's the lens at 16. And yeah, we'll go 1:1. Plenty sharp. Absolutely fine. Does lose it a wee bit in the extreme corner over here, but by right here it's sharp. Hey, that's as good as it gets, really, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, for a zoom lens at 16 millimeter, yeah, and as long as it's consistent, right, and it is the same, it falls off about there. I'm okay with that. That's fine performance. Look at the center sharpness. I mean, that's fantastic. All right, let's see what else we got here. This one is at 22, 23. I was comparing this against my Fujicron primes, and quite honestly, the Fujicrons. So again, we're losing it in the corner there. There it is. Yeah. So I lost it in the corner a little bit more here than at 16, which is kind of weird, but that's okay. Check the center. It's fairly sharp there, so it's definitely a corner thing, and that's okay. Again, that performance is fine. I mean, look at the center. That's just, yeah. The Fujicrons did a little worse than this, which I thought was interesting. So the 16 to 55 f2.8 is well worth the money. The Fujicrons are good and they have their place, but they're not. They're just a hair not as good as this, is my takeaway. And that I thought was interesting. I mean, they are what they are. They're compromise lenses in the sense that they're designed to be small, light, and so the compromise is, like, for example, compare the 35 f2 to the 3314. Well, the 3314, is optimized for image quality. And so at 35 here, it's it's okay. I mean, it's not super, but it's okay. And oh, sorry, we didn't have the lens sharpness turned on. So unsharp mask, lens sharpness, chromatic aberration. Look at the difference. Well, there you go. Now you can see what DxO Labs is doing. And at 35 millimeter approximation, this lens is absolutely tack sharp into the corners, which you would expect that on a zoom lens to be best in the middle. And that's what usually happens. Usually that's where the least distortion is. I think that's why you're having problems in the corners, because look at how sharp that is. And that's DxO Photolab, the sharpening algorithm that's doing that. It may actually be over sharp. But you have complete control over it, and you can turn it down the way you want. So the only time you would want it this sharp is if you were printing it large. Like, it doesn't need to be this sharp. So okay, so what's the takeaway from all this? Well, I've learned quite a few things, and I know things today that I didn't know yesterday. So the bottom line is my 16 to 55 millimeter f2.8 Fuji lens is spectacular, and I have every confidence in it now to produce the results that I'm looking for. Furthermore, I would go so far as to say, if you're using anything but Pure Raw 3 or DxO's Photo Lab 6, you're leaving a lot of your Fuji quality, and you're shooting Fuji, you're leaving a lot of your Fuji image quality on the table. You're not realizing it. I mean, I can't say fairer than that. So moving forward, I'm going to be using DxO Photo Lab 6. Capture 1 was fine because I've never, well, I can't say never. I used to have Lightroom Classic, but I didn't use it that extensively. But from the things that I'm seeing online for the people that are using Lightroom, like, that's your worst choice if you're a Fuji shooter. The image quality from the Lightroom right out of the box looks terrible to me, that I've seen. So Capture 1 did a decent job, but hands down, the DxO image processing, the raw processing of the Fuji files, it's better than the Fuji JPEGs. So DxO can process a Fuji file better than Fuji can. That's what I'm seeing. One other thing to point out that I thought was really interesting is that when I pushed the button, when I took the photographs out in the field and I pushed the button to zoom in the Finder, it wasn't as good. The images were not as good as, and were not as sharp as they are on the screen in DxO Labs. Now, that might be the Finder on the X-T5, although it is 3.6 million dots. It shouldn't be terrible. I think Fuji does zoom in a little bit more than 1:1, so there is that as well. But yeah, I wouldn't check ultimate resolution in your Finder on your camera, but I would check focus and stuff like that. So yeah, and I've also learned that the Fujicrons are definitely compromised lenses, in the sense that, like, ultimate image quality was sacrificed a little bit for the size and the weight, and that's fine. Those are good compromises. I'm comfortable with that. I never expected them to be the best in show. They're good. They're not bad at all. But the 16 to 55 is phenomenal. I mean, that's an amazing lens. And I know I'm pretty happy with my 70 to 300. I've gotten some good results out of it. I need to do some serious testing on it now. The one that's an outlier for me right now is the 10 to 24. I think it's good, but I haven't tested it. Like, I haven't run anything through DxO, so I don't know for sure. And that's the thing. It's a question of confidence, you know. And now that I've gone out and tested this stuff, I have the confidence. I have no problems using the Fuji X-T5 X-H2 for my landscape work, knowing that coupled with DxO processing, you know, that's as good as it gets, and I'm not going to get any better for the size and the weight and the cost. But it's really, at this point, I can say, in my opinion, the Fuji cameras, the 40 megapixel sensor, the X-T5 and the X-H2 with a good lens and DxO processing are definitely swinging above their weight class. So something to think about. But honestly, anyone out there saying, oh, you know, my Fuji camera isn't sharp, or this, that, or the other thing, the 40 megapixel sensor wasn't really worth it. You know, and that's interesting, because that brings up a real question. There was a guy who made some videos over the course of the past few months, since around November. And at the time he was saying, I don't think the 40 megapixel sensor was really worth it. And he just made a video recently where he said that the 40 megapixel sensor with DxO processing, it kind of is tit for tat equal with his $10,000 Canon R5 he rented. Can't have it both ways, brother. It's either it's either not really worth the upgrade and it's only as good as your 26 megapixel X-T3, or it's as good as a Canon R5. I mean, something changed there. And there's an example of what the change is when DxO enters the mix with Fuji. It really is that good. So the other thing that I'll add, and this is just a side note, DxO is worth getting involved with if you shoot Fuji, just for the raw processing. But having said that, like the DxO Photolab 6, it's a really intuitive and easy program to shift to. One of the things that I did is I took an image from 2-3 years ago that was one of my folio images, and I brought it into DxO, and I said to myself, okay, blank slate, there's the raw image, process it, and I know what I want to do to it because I've already processed it in Capture One. And I will tell you, I processed it in about 10 minutes because there were a few things I had to do, a couple of masks I had to put on it to bring the background up and deepen down the foreground, that was bright. And it took 5 minutes, whereas in Capture One, it took me half an hour. So DxO Photolab 6 is a very, very easy program. Just as an example, when I did the other video earlier in this video, where I had the two images side by side in Capture One, and I wanted to sort, like I had to go look up a video on how to do that. Like I couldn't figure it out. And now I know how to do it, but it's not, Capture One is kind of cryptic in a way. Whereas DxO, so in fairness to Capture One, it can put two images side by side and you can compare them. In fairness to DxO can't do that. But what DxO does do is when you switch back and forth between two images, whatever and wherever you were on the first image, when you switch to the second image, it'll do the 200% crop and it'll crop exactly where you were. So in a way you can A/B them, but not at the same time. So I actually prefer the way DxO does it. And it's much easier and intuitive to get there and to do that. All right, this was a long-winded video, but I think it's an important video. Fujifilm is that good. And I know some people are really going to hate this video because that's not what they wanted to hear. But that's where it's at. Like, I'm really impressed. So there's a reason why I've been hanging with Fuji for the past 10 years and trying other stuff. But I'm glad, in a way, I finally feel kind of vindicated because I kind of knew that the Fujis were capable of all this, but it wasn't on a consistent basis. And now I think with the magic of DxO and their processing, I can finally get the consistent results in the image quality out of the Fuji cameras that I'm looking for. It's even improved the 26 megapixel X-T3 shots. Like I'm going back to all my folio images from 2 years ago and reprocessing them. It's that good. Like it's really amazing. But the Fuji cameras and the Fuji lenses have to be the right quality too. Like they have to be able to produce the goods, and they do. I will say this though, you definitely need the better lenses. If you're gonna invest in an X-T5, you kind of need to go with the better quality lenses. Otherwise, just stick with the X-T3, and not that there's anything wrong with X-T3, but if you really want to see what that 40 megapixel sensor is capable of, you got to up your lens game. Like, yeah, I'm right now I'm confident in the 16 to 55, and I can highly recommend that lens with the 40 megapixels. The 70 to 300, I'm less confident, but I've seen good stuff, but I've not really tested it. But I'm pretty sure it's capable. My 10 to 24 so far has looked good, but again, now that I have the DxO processing, I need to see what it'll do. And if there's any lens I'm skeptical about, it may be the 10 to 24, but we'll see. I think mine's a good copy, but it can only do what it can do, so we shall see. And it puts the Fujicrons in perspective. They're good, but they're not great. So there it is. Get the 40 megapixel sensor, get all the 1.4 and 1.2 prime lenses, get the red badge zoom lenses, and the 70 to 300. I'm curious how that 100 to 400 is. Wonder if that's a good lens. It seems like it's okay. Don't know much about it. Anyway. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Long-winded video. I really appreciate you hanging in there. But cutting edge information. This is hot off the press, as they say. We'll see you out there. Have a great one. Bye.